Welcome to the Codecast Podcast. Real-world insights for your daily medical coding and billing processes. And now, here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Codecast Podcast today. I hope everyone's doing great and had a good weekend. Today we have a couple of new things on the menu. So our webinar schedule for 2019 is now up on my website at terryfletcher.net. So if you've budgeted your education dollars for some coding, billing, and reimbursement classes, I would take a look at that. I'm also doing a collection and appeals. You've probably heard it called now Revenue Cycle Management class, and that will be the end of February, and that's going to be the 28th. So take a look at that as well, and hopefully you'll enjoy learning how to collect some of that money that you're concerned about, especially from 2018. We also now have a new Facebook page where you can like us and get a discount on training. So find us at Terry Fletcher Consulting Incorporated on Facebook. My podcast producer made me. I'm not a big Facebook person. I love Instagram. I love Twitter. And I'm on LinkedIn pretty often, mostly business related, but he made me do Facebook. So there it is. So you guys have to humor me here and like us on Facebook. Also, if you go to my website on the contact page, you can sign up for our quarterly newsletter that's going to come out sometime this month. So for the first quarter. So a lot of new updates and exciting news for my business, and it all ties into the podcast. So we're happy to have you here. So today, my topic is going to be a bit of a departure from the norm on all things coding and billing. But I do this every once in a while, especially coming off of, the Top 10 Tuesday from last week. And so we just really hammered the technical side of some coding issues last week. So I want to really discuss a topic that I find is important because of an experience I recently had. And I've had a couple of these same experiences over the last I would say a couple of years. And I would think that this is actually something that has gotten better. And I'm finding there's still some things that fall through the cracks when we talk about patients, first impression of your office, not only from a marketing standpoint, but also from a waiting room and what they're coming into standpoint. So the reason I think this is so important of a topic from healthcare and really still sticks to the core of what I'm trying to do here on the Codecast is, we can't bill for anything and code for anything if we don't have patients. So I wanted to first talk to you about, how do you get your patients? Are you learning the demographics in your area? Are you, trying to figure out who the employers are, the major ones? You can tell by, if you're on a list for a preferred provider organization, or if certain patients are referred to you from primary care offices from an employer in the area. And so there's just some things that we just want to kind of tackle, and then let's get into what the patients are going to see. And then I will still have a coding question today. I might even have two. I'm on the fence about one of them, but I definitely will bring one to your attention because, again, we are the Codecast, so we want to really look at that. But I like to take these little departures sometimes, stick to the topic of healthcare, but just give you something to kind of ponder and maybe some thought-provoking information. I appreciate a lot of our listeners that I've had this week. They've just been so sweet, saying how much they just love the podcast. Shout out to Debbie Stevenson. And she sent me, love your Codecast and Bun Life podcast. Thank you for listening to both. And she just loves being entertained and informed. So she said we keep her smiling. So I really love that. And I've also had a couple of other people say that you're listening to these on your commute. And I know commutes can be tough. Believe me, I'm in Southern California. So today is going to be a little bit longer. Usually I go about 25 to 30 minutes. Today I'm probably going to go closer to 40, but I'm hoping not to hit that 40. I know that can be a little long to listen to me on the whole time, but hopefully that's okay. So let's kind of take a look again at just what we're talking about first from a marketing perspective and how you're targeting your patients. So are you looking at diagnoses and, what's the kind of the prevalent diagnosis in the area? Are you looking at age? Are you looking at payer class, which takes us back to that employer situation? Who are your employers? Has anybody been formally trained in your office in marketing? This actually was something I was thinking about the other day because I was at a practice that they were brainstorming about how to market certain things to patients in the area. And I said, well, who is your marketing guru? And the administrator said, well, that's part of my job. And I said, oh, where did you get your degree in marketing? And she says, oh, I don't have a degree in marketing. She said, actually, I don't have a degree at all, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, where was your experience as far as understanding how to market? Because it is a technical thing. So I started as a marketing major in college and changed to economics because it's a tough thing to tackle. And so I know some of you are thinking, wait, Terry, your numbers and economics and words and you're in coding. Well, yeah, between doing that and getting my RN and staying in the medical field and then, getting into this, it's a long story. It's one that at some point maybe I'll share. But it's just when you get into the marketing field, you really have to, and I want to put it in a way that sounds respectful, you have to academically understand what you're doing, meaning that, in my opinion, I think you need a little bit of formal training. Not necessarily a college degree, but they have certain online classes right now that are not expensive. If there's an online digital magazine and also in paper that I love, and it's called Forbes. And obviously that's all about money and wealth and power and success, but they have some really just interesting and cool things on this magazine. And one of them was an online class for marketing, and it was $20. And you can even get a certificate out of it. And so I was thinking, okay, well, I already have my credentials and degrees and so on and so forth, but I wanted to take it because you can never stop learning and just think, okay, what can I learn from this? And there was some things in there that I thought, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Now, some things I thought, well, I knew that in the back of my mind, but I just never had really that formal class to really make you put your what's the word I'm looking for? Your thoughts and your ideas and your observations really in a more organized sense and, down on paper so that you can be what we call best practices. You can say, okay, here is what I'm thinking, and this is how I want to facilitate this happening. So here's just a couple of examples, and I'm sure some of you will think, oh my gosh, of course I've heard this. So think about sports physicals. Let's say you are a primary care office or a pediatric practice, or let's say you're an orthopedic practice, sports medicine, and you go to the local, I don't want to call it the government, but the local, like AYSO Sports or one of your county sports areas, and the people who run it, and they're all nonprofit, and say, I'd like to offer maybe some, free team physicals, or if anybody gets hurt, my initial visit, will be this discounted price for anybody that's on the team. And just think of what that does to the community, how you can introduce yourself into the community and what kind of referral base you can get. Not only that, you think about going to local schools. High school coaches are always looking to have an in with some kind of a medical entity. And this shouldn't be just a self-serving mission. This should be also, again, when we talk about introducing yourself into the community, come up with a way, not just in pamphlet form, but how to talk to kids about being safe and healthy and, how not to get dehydrated. One of the biggest things, a friend of mine who is a primary care doctor in our area, we deal with a lot of heat here. And so when the kids are outside practicing in 100-degree weather, talking about staying hydrated, talking about that's not soda, that's water and Gatorade and those things. And then if there's a problem, they have a go-to physician that they can get into. And then everybody gets, very familiar with that physician. And don't just stop there. Go to a game, be a participant in what's happening in your community. And I just feel like that could be such a great way to really build your referral base. And not just that, there's promotions you can do. Go to one of the local senior centers. I know that there's one on the other side of where I live, and we try to get there at least twice a year, usually during a holiday, just to sit with them and talk to some of the seniors that walk in, and I bring books in there. And they're lonely, and they don't really always have a primary care doctor. They usually have a specialist. But really find some ways to introduce yourself into the community, and that's going to go a long way from just basic marketing. And again, if any of you can take just an online class, look at the Forbes site. They have some really inexpensive ways that can just give you that little tidbit. I always say if you can learn one thing from any educational piece that you do, then it was worth taking it. Now, before we move into the actual office, the Codecast podcast is also brought to you today by Movado Watch Company, one of the world's leading watchmakers. Movado, modern ahead of its time. Movado.com. Also check out their new affiliate, MVMT Watches, at mvmtwatches.com. And Simple Health Radio, discussing topics related to your health and well-being. simplehealthradio.com. Okay, so before I get into the aesthetics and waiting rooms and location and all that, I'm actually going to do my coding question now because I don't want to forget it, and it's kind of sitting here in front of me. So I've noticed that in some of the coding questions I've been getting lately, a lot of it is about outdated information. So one of my North Carolina members had said, so Terry, after a level 3 evaluation, and let me clarify, this is a new member, after they asked this question, and she said I could post it. I said, can I post this question? I want to put it on my podcast. I promise I won't say your name. She goes, no, it's fine. She goes, we're joining your service. I can't believe we did this. But she says, after a level 3 evaluation and management service for a new patient, so that would be a 99203 code, our orthopedist performed a 2-view radiological examination of a patient's entire spine, anterior, posterior, and lateral. I reported the 72010 for the radiological exam and received a denial. What did I do wrong? Well, radiological exam is just a long way of saying they took an x-ray. So here was my response back, and I think you'll be a little bit surprised. I said, well, your coding would have been correct a few years ago because the code you reported for the exam, 72010, the radiological examination, spine entire survey study, anterior, posterior, and lateral, is no longer in service. So now the correct coding for the scenario would be 72082, and that's the X-ray spine, entire thoracic and lumbar, including skull, cervical, and sacral spine. If performed, they talk about scoliosis evaluation possibly, 2 or 3 views for the exam, and then obviously a 99203 for the E&M. So the reason I bring this up as a coding question is because you have to be very mindful of what is current and what's been deleted and now is a retired code. I think that's one of the biggest things I see in some coding errors is the fact that some practices just aren't updated, and you need to be updated. And one of the things, actually, I'm really happy for you that you found the Codecast, because I pride myself on things being updated, current, and right now. So, and that's why a lot of times with our webinars as well, is that we basically date them and say, okay, so this today it's current, and it'll be current, let's say, for the next 90 days. But after that, you need to come back and check with us, because let's face it, if everything was black and white and forever available and current, then the doctors would not need us as coding professionals and helping them out. Okay, so let's switch gears here, and we're going to look at first impressions and really look at the reality of what a patient is thinking or seeing when they come to your office. So the first thing, you can't make a value judgment about a patient's state of mind when he or she opens the practice door. They may be scared, annoyed, or anxious that they have to come and see a physician. So practices can help mitigate any negative patient feelings about going to the doctor by making the reception area a really comfortable place. And first impressions are the key to any medical facility. And so we would just want to take a look at that, because we've all heard the phrase, you can never make a first impression twice. And that's not just with your reception area waiting room. This holds true for almost anything in life: job interviews, first dates, and yes, the first time a patient steps into your medical office. The first impression you make with an employer can make or break the opportunity, the same way a first impression you make with a potential patient can lead to the patient to your office and potential referrals, or possibly turn them away. So first impressions are an important part of marketing, as we talked about earlier, and marketing you and your medical entity. So when beginning the interview process, if an employer likes what they see with you, negotiations will proceed. This is a similar concept. If the prospective patient likes what they first see, they will make or keep their appointment with you. So years ago, physicians in many states were limited on how they could advertise and market their practice. But since then, medical entities have changed by the use of websites, social media, and today many times the first impression is simply whether or not you have a website. And so a large number of patients, even when they're referred, regardless of their age, they will look or ask a friend or a family member to look for a physician's website or a medical practice's website to find out what they can about the provider or the providers, if it's a large group, the location, the hours of the practice, the parking, what you offer as far as insurance contracts and what you cover, and even patient registration forms. Sometimes they now can be downloaded off the website. So that's a kind of a first opportunity for you to make a first impression. If you do not have a website, schedule a meeting with a website consultant that has experience with medical entities. You want someone to assist with establishing your business as a credible current entity. Also monitor the hits your website gets as a way to monitor how effective it is, and consider a way to have patients sign up for a newsletter like I mentioned I have in my contact page, and that can start your mail list. So that just can be very helpful. And again, I haven't even gotten to the office yet, but now we want to look at your physical location, which can bring us to that old standby location, location, location. Now, many times your physical location cannot be easily changed, and you may not be able to afford the premium location. But there are things that you can do to make the location you have chosen easy to find for patients. The outside should be trash-free. There should be plenty of parking and handicapped options. The first impression of what they are entering. So now on to the reception area. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention before in the marketing area, the marketing problem, is that many medical entities mistakenly refer to the reception area as a waiting room. I do it myself because even with my waiting room designs, I say it's a waiting room design, but that can be a marketing problem. The name waiting room in itself implies that the area is focused on waiting, and patients really should be received in the reception area. When first greeted by staff, that gives the impression that the patient's visit is important and that they're there to make the visit as pleasant as possible. I visit physician practices, frequently when my services are engaged for on-site coding or audits. And so this first impression really are keys to that medical facility. And some of the benefits of a proper, reception area are fairly self-evident, but it can reduce patient anxiety, give a good impression of the practice as a whole. Because one thing you always want to keep in mind, if you take anything away from today's podcast, remember the physician in the examining room, that's really the last person the patient will see during their visit. The first sight for every patient every time is the reception area. It sets the tone for the practice. So if you walk into a messy reception area, your expectations of the care will go down. And if you walk into a clean, quiet reception area, the possibility of your patient's expectations will rise. And so it's also about, being double booked or behind schedule when patients are stacked in the reception area as well. The reception area is also truly reflected by the staff's behavior and figuring out what's going on, with that. I was recently in a practice, and this was not a good moment. So I went over to the counter where two staff members were sitting, and I stood in front of them for about 2 to 3 minutes before either one of them lifted their heads to greet me. And one was reading and the other one was texting on her phone. And what's more important than me as I'm standing there, a potential patient? They did not know who I was at first, and I was there actually to do an on-site audit. But what could be more important than making me feel welcome to the practice? I could have been a new patient, even an established patient. But that first impression is now lost forever. And now it would be damage control, in my opinion, to get any positive feelings about the practice back. And so that was a really eye-opening thing for me when I saw that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to, bring this up, because I think sometimes this can be very dismissive and not really an understanding concept for some practices. They're so used to going into what they've always known and not understanding, is the reception area comfortable in terms of seating and seating arrangements? How's your traffic flow? What's the lighting like? Do you use single seating chairs, bench seating, arms on chairs that can assist some patients in getting up and down, and bariatric patients may not be comfortable with, so you have larger chairs. Both kind of seating situations and considerations need to be made. Coffee tables can take up space and be a hazard to some patients. Does the lighting in the reception area present an area that is warm and friendly, but also can the patient fill out forms if they need to? Again, this reception area is the patient's first impression of your interior office. And the most important thing for me is not just calming and comfortable, but the fact that it needs to be clean. No one wants to sit in a chair where there are dirty tissues, food wrappers, used coffee cups, or stained on the fabric. So pick what you're looking for as far as fabric as well. And I would also keep things clean by putting hand cleaner on every table or mounted to the wall. That really, encourages hand cleaning as well. And make sure that your restrooms are also very well stocked. I think that that's going to be one of the biggest things, because the other issue that comes up quite a bit is tailoring your reception area to your patient population. What works in a pediatrician's office may not be appropriate for other specialties. So when you are looking at a comfortable environment for pediatric patients, think about that. How would that differ from a comfortable environment for geriatric patients, for example? I actually got into a little bit of a disagreement discussion with an administrator who worked in a pediatric practice that the only thing they had were books for the kids. Well, think about this for the second. That's very nice, but a lot of parents who come in with a sick kid have another healthy child in tow that they also need to entertain. One thing I've designed in several offices is a Lego wall. Now, toys are tough because sometimes there's cross-contamination issues. So you have to make sure that you've got the person who checks and cleans the reception periodically throughout the day, also wiping down and cleaning down and disinfecting toys, which that's just what you do. That's what they do at daycare centers. That's just what you do. But you want to make sure that it is comfortable so that you can also make the patient's parent comfortable in that setting. And while it is a good practice to have comfortable chairs with arms on them for all patient populations, it's absolutely vital that the practice sees that there's also going to be patients of size that need to have chairs that are larger. And you also want to make sure that, especially if you have a Medicare practice, that the seating area is close to the restroom and close to the examination area so that they're not having to walk very far. So practices need to understand the psychosocial lives of their patients as well. What do you have on in the waiting room? Do you have loud music? Do you have, this is going to sound funny, but do you have oldies? Do you have current music? I mean, you might have a very young staff, but a very old patient population who will not appreciate hearing, certain harder rap music on your radio. I actually heard that in some of the music that was sent through, or, music that has profanity in it. I'm like, this is a waiting room. So sometimes there's, non-verbal music they can pipe in, but something kind of soothing. I mean, if I played the music I wanted at the beginning end of my podcast, it'd be very different than what you hear. Luckily, my music producer, Disasan, he's good about that. He knows exactly what, when we collaborate, what is good for medical, but you have to speak to your public and speak to your patients. That's part of your impressions. And so, remember, when they go to your website, they're going to get things answered there. They're going to get their office hours and who you are and everything. Does your staff answer the phones throughout the day? Is there a voice recording that picks up? Do you use staggered lunch breaks so that the phones can be answered throughout the day? Many patients, that work during the day will call during their lunch break. Does your staff get in late or leave early with phones unattended? So is your staff trained on how to answer the phone in a positive manner? Projecting to anyone that calls, are they there to help them, is going to be also a first impression that you want to make sure is a trained situation. But as, the physician and mid-level providers and anybody who's on the call that is also an administrator, you're the leader. Make sure that, how casual are you also when you show up to the office? This is one thing that when I talk about first impressions, a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation, because this is something that has come up recently. So when I talk about casual showing up to the office, I'm not just talking about how you dress. So let's say that your office is open from 8:30 to 5. But the doctor doesn't show up till 9 o'clock, is always late. Well, the staff will follow your lead. If office hours say you're open at 8:30, then the staff should be there no later than 8 o'clock to make sure they're turning on lights, computers, regulate temperatures, making coffee, making sure the cleaning crew cleaned all the exam rooms and the waiting rooms and empty trash cans. This time is valuable to patients as well. Not only that, office hours should be flexible to accommodate all types of patients. If you provide evening hours or extended hours or even a Saturday option, your patient satisfaction scores are going to climb immensely. A first impression at how organized and accommodating your practice is, that news travels fast. Believe it or not, to be like, oh my gosh, this, practice was so great. And when you walk in, it's just really, you feel taken care of, and et cetera. And then we get into appearance. So this can be a touchy issue, I know. I'm a very casual person, but I always make sure that, it's a polished, professional look. But how do you and your staff appear in the eyes of your patients? Do you look tired, unkempt? Does everyone wear a uniform that recognizes them as the staff? Or is it casual Friday every day? If you have a dress code in your office, is it being followed, and who enforces it? So most practices generally have a staff entrance that's not used by patients. I like it when they put a mirror on the wall just inside the staff door so they can see how they look as patients greet them. A first impression appearance tells something about you personally. So you can spend a lot of time and money on marketing strategies and materials, but if you don't get your first impression right the first time, whether it be your website, the outside of your office, or the interior of your office, you may not get a second chance. So please, please make sure that you're looking at that. It's 2019. Be updated, refresh your office, and make it a pleasant experience for the patient. Today's coding question was brought to you by Medical Management Institute, educating in coding, billing, and telehealth services, mmiclasses.com. So I'd like to end with my personal insight this week. You guys are really finding out a lot about me over the last, I'd say, how long have I been doing that now? 3 or 4 months. But one of the things, and you've heard me say this, is I have a lot of personal friends who are musicians. As you know, my music producer and content collaborator is a rap artist and also helps me on these. But I get to go to their local concerts. And actually this weekend I was supposed to be out of town for a week up in Portland, Oregon, training and teaching seminars, but we decided to move that to June. And so it looks like I'll be staying local. Great. I have to watch the Super Bowl and watch Tom Brady play. Just don't at me on that. But I get to go to a place near my home for some Italian food and listen to a singer-songwriter and guitarist friend of mine. His name's Greg Brock. He's kind of a throwback to a James Taylor type performer. So I love when I can be part of that and go listen to him play and hang out with a couple of my friends. And then later in the month, another friend of mine who is a bit more of a harder rock style, but also a guitarist and singer. His name is Mark Seal. He'll be playing at the Coach House, which is a local music venue here in San Juan Capistrano, California. And so music just seems to be in my plans in February. So I'm really excited to hear them play, and the fact that I actually get to be in town to enjoy a couple of relaxing non-work nights out with friends, because I've been working nonstop, 13, 14-hour days, and I'm trying not to head towards burnout. So I'm excited to be able to get out and enjoy some of these fun musicians and a couple of nights out. I'm not someone who enjoys, the club scene that the millennials and the younger crowd seems to like. I mean, those things start at 10 or 11 o'clock at night and go past 2 a.m. Yeah, that's past my bedtime, not me. But you give me a cozy venue, a cushy booth, and some great music, some food, some wine, and I'm in. Those start at 7. They usually end around 10:30-ish, and that's more my speed. So hopefully you get to step out a while and do something like that, because, I mean, let's face it, we are all working really hard. We're still finishing up our year end and heading into a very busy 2019. So if you get a chance, make the effort. It's worth the effort just to step out a little bit and have a little bit of fun, even if it's for a couple of hours. So I've had a lot of changes in my personal life, so I'm excited that I can actually have the opportunity to do that. Also, a couple of things that are coming up. I've mentioned it before. It looks like my virtual book club is going to be up in about 2 weeks. And I'll make sure I make the announcement, and it's going to be really fun. We're going to start with a book that's going to be a legal thriller from Lisa Scottolini out of Philadelphia. She is a lawyer who is at an all-female law firm, and it's awesome. She's so funny, but the intrigue is there, and I love it. So we're going to start with that. And I've had so much positive on starting that. And then my Business Collective podcast, you must think that's all I do is podcasts, but it's just fun. It's just fun for me to do that. And that's going to start hopefully in March 1st. And what that plan is to show you how to go from employee to consultant, not just in healthcare, but just really try to decide also for yourself. Do you want to continue to be an employee, or would you like to step outside the box, and just try to see what you have for yourself? Think of, retirement. I don't know if I'll ever retire because I just enjoy what I do, but that means you have to decide, are you going to work for somebody or do things on your own? And I can help you with that and decide if that's something for you and how to facilitate that transition. So keep a lookout for that, and we'll continue with the month. So I'm also going to be getting into some of the hierarchy codes. We have some planned series on the HCC coding for webinars, and they're really expensive webinars through other venues. So a HEMA I know is like $2,000, and I think I saw another one that was PMI was like $3,000. And so we're going to do them for $200 each, and we're going to have a series of 4. And so they're $199 each. So look on my website if you're interested in dealing with some of the risk assessment, risk value, and the HCC coding, and at terryfletcher.net. But everybody, until next week, make it a great day, and we'll talk to you next time on the Codecast podcast.
For more information on medical coding, billing, auditing, and compliance, including how to hire Terry, follow Terry on Twitter at TerryCoder1, or visit her website at www.terryfletcher.net. Podcast producer Joe Kuzma. Music producer Dassassin Music.